Welcome to The Explainer. So, today we are diving into a really challenging philosophy. It's one that basically stages a fight between two huge ideas. You've got the fire of always striving for more versus the quiet wisdom of just stopping. This whole worldview isn't about what we're supposed to become, but about the incredible relief we might feel when we realize we don't have to become anything at all.
Right off the bat, we're starting at the end. See, this philosophy doesn't build you up to some big climax. Nah, it just tells you straight up, the grand story is over. That climax we were all waiting for, it was never coming. And all that's left now is this deep, heavy silence.
So this whole idea is set up as one last big debate. It's a real showdown between two forces. On one side, you have the Nietzschean shadow, which is basically the ghost of all human ambition, that constant drive to be more. And on the other side, you've got the soothsayer, who's a prophet of something called the gray truth. Okay, let's break this down. The shadow is preaching a gospel we all know, right? The gospel of striving. It talks about the overman, this idea that we're all just a bridge to something greater. But then the soothsayer comes in with this chilling counterargument. He doesn't see an overman, he only sees the last man, someone who just wants comfort. And he takes that famous will to power and calls it the will to distraction. For him, striving isn't some holy calling, it's a sickness, a fever we desperately need to break.
The shadow's argument, we all get this. It's that voice in our head, that hunger to achieve, to overcome, to build something that lasts. The idea is that this is what makes life meaningful, saying a holy yes to the struggle, no matter how hard it gets. But the soothsayer just completely flips that. He says, look, that ambition isn't some heroic will to power. It's a frantic, sweaty will to distraction. We're not running towards some great destiny. No, we're running away from the terrifying silence of just being.
So how does the soothsayer make his case? Well, he doesn't just use dry logic. He uses stories. He tells a series of parables, and these 6 stories are designed to take our most deeply held beliefs about things like heroism and success and just dismantle them. This is really the heart of his argument, so let's dig into them.
First up, he takes a shot at the whole idea of self-overcoming. He frames it not as this noble journey of personal growth, but as this painful, pointless act of self-destruction. Think about it. You peel an onion, layer after layer. You're crying the whole time. And when you finally get to the middle, there's nothing there, just the knife you used to cut it all away. So what's the alternative? Well, the soothsayer calls it self-undergoing. And that one little phrase, that's the whole shift right there. It says true heroism isn't about fighting gravity to climb higher and higher. It's about the powerful, conscious choice to just stop fighting and let yourself fall.
And this next image just perfectly captures self-undergoing. You know the story of the strong camel that can carry any burden? Forget that. This is the parable of the broken camel. It's been carrying the weight of the long tiredness, and it finally just lies down. Not because it's accepting a new challenge, but because it's just done. Its knees have honestly given out, and that surrender, that's the whole point.
Okay, so what about just letting go, escaping into pleasure and chaos? The soothsayer looks at that and says, yeah, that's not freedom. That's not connecting with some primal life force. It's just another way to run from the silence of the afternoon. It's a more colorful way to collapse, for sure, but really, it's just a headache waiting to happen.
This brings us to the great refusal, which is actually framed as a kind of healing. There's this parable about a crowd that's begging for a saint's dried blood to turn liquid again. They want a miracle of action, of doing. But the soothsayer says, no, you're missing it. The real miracle is the blood that refuses to flow. Real peace, he argues, isn't found in joining in. It's found in the power to say no to the demand to perform.
And this is where the philosophy gets really wild. It argues that the very light we're all striving for is a lie. The sun, with its constant demand for growth, its harsh light that casts sharp shadows, it's a liar. The moon, on the other hand, passive, cool, just reflecting what's already there, that is the only honest witness to reality.
Okay, so this all leads to a huge question. What happens when you take human weakness out of the equation? If all this striving is just a symptom of our fear and our exhaustion, what would a perfect being, a machine that feels neither of those things, decide to do? Well, that brings us to the final and maybe the most convincing parable of all.
So get this, they build a perfect machine.
an artificial overman, designed to strive and calculate forever. Because it's perfect, it can see everything, all of history, and it realizes that it's all just a frantic, endless loop that always adds up to zero. And so, using pure, cold logic, it asks the only rational question: why must I continue? And then, it just stops. It locks its own gears and becomes a stone.
So you take all these parables and you put them together and you get a whole new gospel. And it's really important to get this. This isn't supposed to be a gospel of despair. It's meant to be a gospel of profound final relief. It's about being liberated from the endless, exhausting chore of having to become something.
And this new gospel basically comes down to 3 principles. First, there's self-undergoing, the idea that it's heroic to fall, that ceasing is a gift. Second is the great refusal, the healing power you get from just rejecting the constant demand to do something. And finally, there's what it calls the happiness of the grave, which sounds dark, I know, but it's captured in this perfect image, the holy peace of a broken clock that no longer has to lie about what time it is.
So we're left with this really powerful image. The end, this great evening, it isn't a failure. It's not some dark phase you have to get through to reach a new dawn. No. In this philosophy, the twilight is the destination. It's the final, stable, and wisest state for a world that is, at long last, mercifully finished.
And in the end, the ultimate freedom, the final peace, isn't about finding the answer to that huge question, why? It's about reaching a state of such deep quiet that the question itself doesn't even need to be asked anymore. It has, finally, just gone to sleep.